This is the second of a three-part series about money. It takes us from currency that has intrinsic value, such as coins made from precious metals, to paper money and beyond. It shows how the banks create money from thin air and how this leads to astronomical debts which we can never repay. In part 1, we saw that anything can be used as currency: shells, tally sticks and salt. But gold is different. It is really useful in medicine, aerospace, electronics and jewelry. It does not oxidize and thus is critical for electrical contacts that must never fail. But paper money? Well, you can light your fat cigar, and plastic notes won't even do that. Gold cannot be made. Gold cannot be destroyed. Gold is useful, and there is no more gold. Gold is a perfect currency. It behaves like a barter economy because gold itself has value and so many important uses. To become rich, you have to get more gold. So how do you do that? Well, you can dig for it. And many people did that in the gold rush. You can pan for it. And many people have done that, including me. Or you can steal it from people who have it. And the Romans were very good at that. In 70 AD, Vespasian put down a rebellion by the Israelites. It was reported that the temple was awash with blood, so much so that the bodies slid down the steps. He took all the gold and the menorah and the other sacred vessels. He took everything. It was enough to build the Colosseum at a modern day cost of about $800 million. That is another way to get your gold. Most of the gold in Rome came from looting the countries they conquered. It paid for the army and the prosperity and the glory of Rome. The growth of the Roman Empire needed more money. This was done by decreasing the size of their gold coin, the aureus, but keeping the same face value. Tin was added to their silver coin, the denarius, until it eventually became worthless through inflation. The Roman Empire, after a stable currency for 300 years, paid the heavy price of collapse for giving in to that temptation, as will our governments today. The gold standard. Gold and silver coins were used as currency since ancient times. The coins were small and easy to transport. The metals had intrinsic value. They were easy to exchange with other currencies, and the exchange rate was simply found by weighing the coins. Today, we are told that our Canadian piece of paper with a 10 on it is worth the same as 7 pieces of American paper with a 1 on. What utter nonsense. At one time, paper money could be exchanged for gold or silver coins, and each paper note was a receipt or a bill of sale, and it contained this promise that the bearer on demand will be paid a certain amount in pounds sterling. That means in real hard cash. This is the end of the gold standard. The first reason is that every person needs a certain amount of gold to see them through life, for their education, for their food, for their housing, for their clothing and so on. So every person who is born is a certain debt on society. Now we have a situation where the population was increasing rapidly, but the gold supply was not. In fact, the gold supply is static. So you have to create money some other way. Now, the gold currency also could not respond to a crisis, such as wars, when you need a lot of money very quickly. In fact, right now, the coronavirus pandemic is a place where we need a lot of money very quickly, and gold cannot be found in sufficient quantities to provide that money. America effectively abandoned the gold standard in 1933 and completely severed the link between the dollar and gold in 1971. This was when the American greenback, which is actually fake currency, became the currency standard for the whole world. Banks are private institutions. Most large cities in America have several private banks. Most countries have a privately owned central bank. Now, central banks create money from thin air. They are the greatest scam on the planet. They are directly responsible for funding wars. There is a hard thing to understand how banks make this money out of thin air. There is no huge printing press in Toronto Dominion or CIBC that prints money day and night. There are no trucks taking those notes to the branches. There is just someone punching numbers into a computer. That is how money is made. I hope that makes you scared, because it should. This is an example of how money makes wars possible. The Rothschilds are the most famous banking family in history. In the 19th century, they lent money to the kings and governments and funded both sides in the Napoleonic Wars. They lent money to Napoleon and to the Duke of Wellington. At one time, they saved the Bank of England from collapse with their own money. It's amazing they had sufficient money to bail out the Bank of England. Now, at the end of this battle, the Battle of Waterloo, the Rothschild had another trick up their sleeve. They had a series of fast horsemen in Belgium, and they galloped to the coast, took a boat quickly to England, and told Rothschild who had won the battle. And he was then able to go to the stock exchange next day and make some very clever trading, which left him an absolute billions of dollars. So that is actually how wars are made, by money. So let me repeat that banks are private institutions, and most large cities in America have several private banks, and most countries have a central bank, like the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve Bank, but they are still private banks. Now, we're actually ruled by the top 1%, and you can see how clever they are, because when they make these central banks, they give them names that make them look as if they are part of government. The Bank of England you expect to be run by the British Parliament or the government. The Federal Reserve Bank you expect to be part of the USA Parliament or government, but it is not. In fact, it is these entities, the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve Bank, that actually run the government. Governments borrow this non-existent money from the central bank. There are no banknotes, no gold, just numbers in ledgers. Governments have only human and natural resources as collateral, so they pay the capital and interest by taxing the people. It is impossible to get enough money by taxation, so the government takes out even larger loans to run the country. Those loans, TBLs, taxpayer-backed loans, are now so huge that it is impossible for them to ever be repaid. So let us remember, bank money is just a number in a ledger in your account. It is digital money. Now, there are not enough plastic banknotes in circulation to cover those numbers. So real currency looks the same as fake currency, because real currency and fake currency are both numbers. So any number in an account, your account, is as good as any other number in that account. So in fact, the banks are issuing counterfeit money. They are merely numbers, but it's still counterfeit. Now, if I do that, I go to prison. So why don't they? And this is when things went seriously wrong, which I'm sure comes as no surprise. So this is what happened when we started to use fake money. It is easy come, but not so easy go. Our debt is now 1.5 trillion. It is growing so fast that thousands of dollars are added every second, and most of that is interest on previous loans. And every Canadian now owes $50,000 of debt. This is not government. It is a massacre of the people. We are all being flushed down the toilet by the politicians who are the servants of the 1%. We need a population that really knows the truth about banks. Right now, it is estimated that only 3% of the population know about the fake money that we all use. These are a couple of links to videos which are excellent. The first one is a great cartoon, and the second one is a history, which will be an amazement to you all. And another problem we have is that we all believe that we're better off than ever before. And for most of the world, that simply is not true. Our ancestors were not rich, but they had an abundance of leisure and real money. Today, we are still not rich. We have little leisure, and our money is fake. We have reached the end of part 2. In part 3, I will look at what can be done about money and banks. In the meantime, please think about helping us return to a true democracy. The wisdom of crowds would have cleared up this mess decades ago.